Hey, what's going on, everyone? Today we're delving into a chilling true crime case that shook Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Today we'll be discussing the mysterious disappearance of Heather Elvis. It all began in the winter of 2013 when 20-year-old Heather Elvis vanished without a trace. She was a vibrant young woman full of dreams and aspirations, working as a hostess at a restaurant called Tilted Kilt, a Celtic-themed Hooters-style restaurant. As she worked at the Tilted Kilt, she pursued a degree in cosmetology. Heather was known for her friendly, bubbly personality. She was always the life of the party. Now let's rewind a bit and give you some background on Heather's life. She was born on June 30th, 1993, in South Carolina to her parents, Terry and Debbie Elvis. She also had an older brother named Christopher and a younger sister named Morgan. Growing up, Heather and her family were members of the Baptist Church.
Heather is everything you can want in a daughter. She's loving, she's giving, she works with the children at her church.
In 2011, she actually went on a mission trip to Costa Rica. When she returned home, her family was eager to hear about the sights of Costa Rica, but Heather seemed more excited to talk about homes she built for people there. In June of 2013, she lived with her best friend and co-worker at the Tilted Kilt, Brianna. It was actually at the Tilted Kilt that Heather saw the plumbing guy, 38-year-old Sydney Moore. She was instantly attracted, tweeting,
"The guy who builds things at my job makes me cream myself. #wet dreams tonight. One of these days I will drag that man into the mop closet and have my way with him. Lord have mercy."
Sydney has an attraction to Heather too, and they start flirting. He brings her bagels and coffee at work, even coming in on his off days to hang out with Heather. Soon, the flirtation blossoms into a full-on romance.
The day that they first started talking, like over a series of weeks, it was her running and being like, "Bree, Sydney did this and we're going to do this and we hung out here," and every time he would come in, she would almost like run away because it was like, oh, like Sydney's here kind of thing. When it came to Heather, he made her feel like she was his one and only. She told me she loved him.
There was just one problem. Sydney was married to 40-year-old Tammy Moore. Sydney and Tammy had 2 kids together. They also shared a successful business together, Palmetto Maintenance. The marriage didn't deter Heather and Sydney's affair, though. Sydney even talked about bringing in Heather to be a nanny to his 2 kids. It was all fun and games until Tammy found out about the affair in October of 2013. She kept Sydney handcuffed to the bed at night and went with him everywhere. She even had him get her name tattooed on his stomach. Tammy's rage was also directed at Heather. She would call her and say things like,
"You're going to leave my husband alone, or else."
Tammy also sent Heather dozens of angry text messages like,
"Someone's about to get their beat down. Your is about to take his last breath.
You can tell me where you are right now, or I will find out another way. That way won't have a great turnout for you. I'm giving you one last chance to answer before we meet in person. Only one. Hey, sweetie, ready to meet the missus?"
Eventually, Tammy called Heather.
She said, "You're gonna end it with my husband." So she put Sydney on the phone and sat there while Sydney and Heather talked, and they ended things on the phone. But Sydney made comments to Heather and said, "You were nothing to me. You were just someone who spread your legs," and basically tore Heather apart as a human being.
Heather was devastated by Sydney's words, but accepted the relationship was over. Still, Tammy wasn't finished with Heather. Tammy called the Tilted Kilt, constantly trying to get Heather fired. She said Sydney wouldn't come in to do repairs if Heather was still working there. This caused Heather to lose shifts. Tammy even texted Heather pictures of her and her husband having relations. Heather eventually texted back,
"I think you're a little obsessed with me. I'm no one you need to worry about anymore."
On November 5th, Heather saw Sydney for the last time. Afterwards, she retweeted this joke. From November 15th to December 11th, Sydney, Tammy, and their 2 kids took an extended trip to Disney World. This wasn't anything unusual, as Tammy was a huge Disney fan. Anyway, during this time, Heather seemed to be cheering up and getting over the breakup and back to her old self. She started attending church again with her friend Brianna, and she got a new job at a beauty parlor. Heather had also started gaining weight during this time. She had to change the size of her Tilted Kilt uniform.
I was in charge of the uniforms at Tilted Kilt, so their bra, their shrug, and their kilt were all provided by us. She had to change her bra out from a A cup to a B cup, and then later to a C cup, and also she needed a bigger kilt.
What did she think was causing these physical changes?
At first, from the A cup to the B cup, she really wasn't thinking much, just that she gained some weight. But then she started to get concerned when she had to go to the C cup and get the kilt.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did she ever take any kind of pregnancy test?
She took one at Tilted Kilt in the restroom, yes.
Okay. And if you don't mind, did you see the pregnancy test?
I did.
Okay. And tell this jury what it said.
It said error, and I went into the office and looked up why a pregnancy test would say error, and it said that either it was inconclusive or she did not urinate on it enough.
So, no one really knows for sure if Heather was pregnant or not. But if she was, the timing would make Sidney the father. Now, on to December 17th, 2013. Heather had a date with a new guy. It was Stephen Schiraldi, a guy who went to high school with Heather. Heather was really excited about this date. It was her first since the breakup with Sidney. At about 7 p.m., Stephen picked up Heather for dinner. Then they drove around and looked at Christmas lights around the neighborhood, which was Heather's favorite holiday activity. Then they went to this small parking lot and Stephen taught Heather to drive stick shift. She texted her dad a picture.
The picture speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Like she's smiling ear to ear. She's having a great time, and she's extremely proud. I have a service truck that's it's a stick shift, and we tried to teach her so many times, and it just scared me to death trying to ride with her. I remember my dad teaching me, and I know I had to scare him too.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm glad she found somebody that could teach her, but she texted a picture, and the words were simple. She said, "I'm driving a stick. Look at me, I'm a pro," with an exclamation point.
Stephen drops Heather off at her apartment between 1 and 1:15 a.m. At 1:19 a.m., Sidney Mora was caught on CCTV at a local Walmart buying a pregnancy test. 20 minutes later, Sidney calls Heather from a payphone. Heather then calls her friend Brianna to tell her about Sidney's call.
Crying. When I asked her what was wrong, she told me Sidney had called her.
Brianna was floored when Heather told her why he called.
He said that he left his wife and that he missed me and he wanted to see me. And she was like, "I don't know what to do." And I was like, "Well, how about you sleep on it?" She was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go to sleep and I'll talk to you tomorrow." And we always end our conversation with "love you." So we said "love you," hung up, and that was the last time I talked to her.
At 2:29 a.m., Heather called the payphone Sidney called her from, but got no answer. Heather's phone pinged at Longbeard's restaurant. At 2:57, she heads to Augusta Plantation Drive, but then turns around and goes back to Longbeard's. At 3:16, she calls Sidney's cell phone, but he doesn't answer, so she goes back to her apartment. She called Sidney again and spoke to him for 4 minutes. Then, at 3:25 a.m., Heather heads to Peachtree Boat Landing on the Waccamaw River. During the day, Peachtree Boat Landing is full of boaters and stuff, but at night it is empty, dark, and secluded. At 3:45 a.m., a house camera catches a black Ford F-150, the same truck Sidney drives going from the direction of his house to the boat landing. About 10 minutes later, Heather's phone either dies or is turned off. Another camera catches the Ford F-150 heading from the boat landing to Sidney and Tammy's house. The next morning, Heather's car was reported abandoned at the Peachtree Boat Landing. Heather's father, Terry, was called. He said Heather's car was a mess, which is not unusual since that's usually how Heather kept it. Cops let Terry bring Heather's car home, potentially ruining any evidence. Terry reported Heather missing, and searches began around the Peachtree Boat Landing. Police talked to Stephen, Heather's date, but he is quickly eliminated as a suspect. Investigators kept hearing about the affair with Sidney Moorer and the harassment from Tammy Moorer. When police confronted them, Sidney kept changing his stories. He didn't know Heather, then he did.
When was the last time you talked to her before that 3 or 4 minutes?
Oh, shit, probably into October, beginning of November, right in there somewhere.
So you hadn't talked to her?
Oh, no. It was like well before, because we went on vacation. It was well before we went on vacation. And there was nothing. The last thing,
no contact or anything?
Yeah, there was the last thing that was sent or anything was she sent a period to me, and that was it.
And that was through text messages or phone calls?
And I didn't.
Did she normally text or call?
Usually it was text.
Because you can delete them a little easier? Or?
Well, no, that's just usually the way we talk. Cause
when did your wife find out that that was kind of going on?
About the end of October.
End of October. Okay. Now,
and she asked, "What do you want to do?" And I mean, at first I didn't tell her what was going on.
Had she ever met her?
No.
Never seen her, never met her?
Nope. And then the following day, I told my wife what was going on, and my wife actually talked to her, and they had planned a meeting, and she didn't show up for the meeting.
Mm-hmm. How'd you start a relationship? Just
a couple of the girls had said, hey, Heather had a dream about you, like a nasty dream or something. And I'm like, okay, good. And then, I would go on about my business. And like 2 or 3 times that kind of happened. And then, we just kind of we would talk a little more every time in person. And then she started calling me. And I still don't know how she got my phone number, but she started calling me.
And this is
around, kind of led on,
you think? Summer?
Mid-September or something, maybe.
Okay. So she started texting or calling you, and you started calling her back. I mean, she's a young, pretty girl.
Yeah. And she was interested in...
There was a phone call made to Heather that night from a payphone at the gas station on 10th Avenue.
Okay.
And we have video from that.
Okay.
Did you try calling her? Just a minute?
No.
A second? You sure?
Maybe.
Okay, how about we start again?
I did. I called her. From
okay, let's start from the start again. Because I don't know you. You don't know me.
I know. In the whole story, everything's legit. Okay.
Let's go back to the part where it stopped being legit. And start from the
I did call her on the payphone.
Okay. And what did you say?
I asked her to please leave me alone because she had been leaving notes on her car when I was at work.
To call and say, leave me alone to a woman who hasn't contacted
you need to start over.
Yeah, let's start over. Because
that ain't flying, boss.
But you guys don't understand. I had boyfriends. We had an open marriage. Okay. That's okay. I could care less if he had sex with 100 people.
Okay. All right.
I mean, that it doesn't bother me. Yeah. So, I mean, this girl, I can tell you just as an outsider looking at the Twitter, which I didn't know existed until all this went down, she's not right. She's not normal. I was 20. I partied with bands constantly. I wasn't that kind of girl. And believe me, I had the friends to make me that kind of girl, and I didn't do it. So there's something not right with her.
I'm not assuming that anything's happened to this girl. She could be running around for all.
That's what I'm thinking, too. She could just be, but he doesn't want me to.
He was never at Peachtree Landing. When police show him proof, he changes his story and says, yeah, I was there having sex with Tammy. And as for that pregnancy test at Walmart.
I was actually buying it for my wife. She was in the vehicle when I bought it for her. She took it that night, and it was negative like so many before and after.
So police didn't believe these lies, and believed Sydney was responsible for what happened to Heather. But with no Heather, and no evidence, they really couldn't do anything. In December 2013, the Center for Missing People got involved in the search. The Elvis family made a Facebook page, Find Heather Elvis, and announced a $1,000 award. A prayer vigil was held for Heather, and the reward was raised to $20,000 as land and water searches continued. Nothing was found, though, and the reward was again raised to $30,000. Meanwhile, Sydney and Tammy started feuding with the Elvis family, and the community took sides. Sydney claimed he and his family were threatened through social media and phone. People threatened to burn down his house, eat his children, and mutilate their pets. No proof of this was found. Tammy also posted to Facebook.
Well, Sydney cheated on me in the months of September through October with a psycho whore who has since gone missing, and now her crazy daddy is threatening to kill my children and Sydney, therefore making Sydney stupid. This girl grabbed his business card out of the office at her workplace and had fantasies about him as far back as March, but talking about him in July. Naming him. I don't know of any other word to describe my husband at this point. All you have to do is research this girl's Twitter, although 4 months of it has gone missing in the past couple of weeks, and her Tumblr to see what a twisted person she truly is. I could care less seeing that I had a boyfriend of my own for the past couple of years, but when someone brings my children into the scenario, it's a whole other story. I will not tolerate anyone hurting my children because my husband banged a hoe 3 times in the back seat of her car and nothing more. I could care less what he screwed around with, but the fact that this jerk is stalking my family is unacceptable.
The community was split while many searched for Heather and prayed for her safe return. Others were vicious on social media. They labeled Heather as a home-wrecking slut and felt sympathy for the mourners, especially Tammy. Terry Elvis, Heather's dad, told police 2 men in a black Jeep drove past his workplace screaming, "Heather was first, Morgan is next." This incident couldn't be confirmed, though. In February of 2014, police searched Sydney and Tammy's house. The house was filthy, with rotting meat and molding food. There were also guns everywhere. Security cameras at the Moorer house showed Sydney and Tammy cleaning their Ford F-150 just days after Heather's disappearance. The footage also showed Tammy searching the property with a mirror around the same time. After an 11-hour search, Sydney and Tammy were arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. They were charged with an additional counts of indecent exposure after cops found pictures of them having sex in public. As they sat in jail, they were charged with Medicaid fraud after cops discovered the Moorers had lied about their income to get Medicaid benefits. In early 2015, the couple was released on bond. They had to wear ankle monitoring devices and were ordered to stay 5 miles away from the Elvis family and not to talk to them on social media. The court also put a gag order on anyone involved in the case. In September 2015, the judge allowed the Moorers to move to Florida since Sydney couldn't find work in Myrtle Beach. In March of 2015, the murder charges against the couple were dropped. There was no body or other physical evidence, so even though the state believed the Moorers had killed Heather, they knew it would be too hard to get a murder conviction. The charges of kidnapping would still remain, though.
That I've seen come out of people, it amazes me. How you can be so mean to someone you know nothing about a subject you know nothing about something that we did not do.
Since being charged, Sydney Moorer says he's lost nearly everything he's worked for in his life and can't get a job while the case goes through the legal system. Despite the costs, Moorer says he won't stop fighting the charges.
Because if I confess to something I didn't do, then there's a murderer or a kidnapper or whatever running around somewhere in this community. And no one even knows. That's the scary part.
In June of 2016, Sydney was put on trial for kidnapping. After 5 days of testimony, the jury was split. 10 thought he was guilty, 2 didn't. One of the 2 was friends with Sydney's lawyer. A mistrial had to be declared.
Received a note from Mr. Lang, and he indicates the jury is still deadlocked and will be unable to resolve it. The jury has received instruction; they are still deadlocked. Therefore, I'll declare a mistrial. In this case, will have to be tried again.
Sydney was sentenced to 5 months for violating the gag order with his interview, though. He was released after 2 months.
Sydney, do you have anything to say about getting out of jail today?
2 words: malicious prosecution.
Sentenced for breaking a gag order. Do you think that that was fair to have served 2 out of 5 months?
Yeah, definitely.
The potential sentence of much longer than 2 months looms. What about the possibility of you going away and Tammy going away for a lot longer?
We've talked about it, because I mean, anything can happen.
In July of 2017, Sydney was tried and convicted of obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to the maximum of 10 years. In October 2018, it was Tammy's turn to stand trial for kidnapping. Tammy broke the gag order and gave an interview as her trial was going on.
What we got accused of, neither one of us would ever do.
Which part?
The kidnapping. And at first it was murder as well, and we're not those kind of people. I've never even had a speeding ticket. I didn't even have sex till I was 18 years old.
There are people who say that you wore the pants in the family, that you were really the powerhouse here.
The man that makes the money is the one that's running the house. I paid the bills.
And the wife who gets her name tattooed on her husband's stomach,
that was
right
his
above
idea.
the belt,
that was his
seems
idea.
to be the one who makes the rules.
But that's making it sound like he got a tattoo because I forced him to and I didn't.
Okay, so since we're on that subject, after he had the affair with Heather, did you actually handcuff him to
Never.
the bed?
Never.
It sounds like you're trying to hide or cover up something that seems completely natural, which is anger resulting from your
I'm
husband
not
cheating
mad
on
at
you.
her. I am pissed at him because he's not being honest with me.
Yet, the prosecution essentially alleged in the beginning that you were angry enough that your husband cheated on you, that you were ready to kill.
That's what they say. And they're wrong.
Were you angry enough that your husband cheated on you that you were ready to kidnap?
Absolutely not.
It seems that the prosecution to some degree thinks that you are the linchpin here, not Sydney.
They change it according to what they need to say.
It seems like everybody is lying here. Except you.
And that's why I am terrified of tomorrow, because I feel like this town is going to crucify me because of all the lies and all of the that's happened.
Tammy was eventually found guilty and sentenced to 30 years. In September 2019, the retrial of Sydney for kidnapping started. This time, Tammy's cousin, Donald DeMarino, testified. He said Sydney showed him a shocking photo.
Tell this jury who that picture was of.
Heather Elvis.
In that picture, did Heather look like she was under her own free will?
No.
Let me ask you this. After seeing that picture of Heather back in 2014, do you expect this family to ever hear from her again?
No.
Sydney was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years. Despite the lengthy prison sentences, Heather's remains were never found, leaving her fate a haunting mystery to her family. We can only hope these sentences have given them some form of justice. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you very soon. Bye.
Where did you go?